Hey everyone, my name is Tristan Pope, and today I am bringing you the ultimate showdown, the A7R III by Sony versus the iPhone X.
I'm gonna let you guys make the decision. Can you tell the difference between the photos? I don't think you would be able to on a site like Instagram. Obviously, there's the whole push in and the megapixels, 42 versus 12. Yes, there's a big difference, but with the portrait mode and the bokeh and the depth mapping on this, there's something interesting to be said about that. And the real secret to all of this is lighting. They never go, hey, your lighting is awesome. They just go, that's a good photo. They don't go, oh man, your lighting was spot on. They just feels right. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna be really aggressive with lighting today.
The goal here is to compare the Sony shots side by side with the iPhone shots and let you guys make the decision. Which one do you think works for you? I don't say which one's better, because I really do feel like all of these different cameras have different use cases to tell your story. So I'm not really like a tech, break it down into specs, pixel peeping, mega counting, frame numbers and things and I mean, I do my research and I understand my equipment, but to me what's more important is what just works. What I want to show many of you is the results of a piece of equipment many of you already have in your pockets, if not all of you.
I can adjust the bokeh. Fantastic. Look at that. That's your whole depth mapping right there. Magic.
Versus a piece of equipment that's aimed at professionals, and see where these things excel at telling your story. So here's the first set of images. I made sure that I went in and I color corrected everything to match as close as possible for the Sony and the iPhone, so that it was very difficult for you guys to pull them apart. With that in mind though, I also had to go in and I had to adjust the bokeh balls to semi-match what the Sony could do with the 50mm lens that I used, because that's equivalent or so of what the iPhone uses at 50mm on the portrait mode. What you're seeing here is an image with the bokeh balls boosted up, and that's the image on the right, which is the iPhone. And the image on the left is the Sony. So the image on the right, if I were to go the original image with just portrait mode, that's the blur it does. That's the natural blur and the bokeh it would give you, especially from this distance. And so I went into a program called Focus, and I was able to adjust that and match it to the bokeh on the Sony. I mean, this program has so many different options in it. You can even set the bokeh balls to be apples or stars. It has presets for different lenses. You can go in and you can change the bokeh by every little tiny detail you could think of: shape, size, color, grain, you name it, it's got it. And then you've got this amazing depth mapping feature, which allows you to actually drag and pull where you want the bokeh to start, if you want the bokeh to be in the back or the front. Just gives you amazing flexibility with what you're doing and what you're trying to edit. Now, I know there's going to be some people that are like, well, that's cheating. The Sony doesn't have that capability. And to you, I say, exactly. That is why these tools that we have are so awesome, and just so much of what we can do with them now is exciting and really groundbreaking. So, I mean, imagine if the Sony could depth map and you could go into Adobe and do those types of adjustments. It would be fantastic. But now I want to show you the zoom in difference on the Sony versus the iPhone. There's really no comparison. What I call this is where, you know, they're denoising it and coloring and everything so much that I call it the painted face look, because it's essentially painting your face while it's trying to denoise and also get the color correct and get your skin tones correct. Whereas this, you know, it is your skin, it is your colors. However, it's extremely convenient if you want that skin smoothing for an Instagram post. I mean, the other thing that you have to think about is it's actually easier for me to color correct to do these matching on the raw file from the Sony than on the iPhone, because there's just more data there. Now, out of all of those photos, I think this one was probably the hardest because I took out the color. You can't see the color difference in the bokeh. I matched the bokeh balls almost identically using that Focus app. And so finding the difference here is extremely difficult, especially because of the sharpness on both images. This is the Sony shot and this is the iPhone shot. In any use case other than zooming in, there's no way to tell the difference. I mean, I think you'd be very hard pressed to tell the difference between these two. And that's really what is cool about this, is that, you know, I'm not a pixel peeper, and so this would work great. I mean, I'm not going to take out my iPhone for a print shot for Instagram. That's a right out of the camera, beautiful picture. And this is also wonderful. I mean, if you were to set this to its natural color, it's just really nice too. And the iPhone's original color would look like that. So they're both pleasing to the eyes without any edits as well. Now, I did throw an image in here to kind of mess with you guys. This is both iPhone shots. None of these are shot on the Sony. The reason I did this is because I wanted to show you how much flexibility you have with this depth mapping in that Focus app and how much of a difference the shots can actually look like. So just looking at these, you know, this looks like I shot it with a 1.2 aperture, and this looks like, you know, I shot it on an iPhone. But they're both shot on iPhone. So here's the first blind images again. On the left, you have the iPhone shot, and on the right, you have the Sony. Now, the difference here is that the Sony, when reset to normal colors, is very, very close to what I corrected it to. The iPhone shot, on the other hand, is not really very close. Overall, it's very interesting how many of these photos actually caught focus faster on the iPhone than on the Sony. I found that I wasn't really ever throwing out a photo because of, you know, bad focus. As with my 50mm lens on my Sony, sometimes I wouldn't catch the right focus, whereas the iPhone, it was pretty spot on every time. But you have a little bit more flexibility with the Sony when it comes to shots like this, because you can pull out a little further. You don't have to be as close to the subject, so you can get multiple different shots, really just accentuating, you know, that nice soft blur and that nice fall off. And, you know, honestly though, to tell the difference between these two, once again, it's really difficult. I mean, that's why I feel as though, you know, these comparisons are awesome, because it truly shows you how much power you have in your pocket and where we might be going in the future. Now, here's the second blind comparison test. I have bad news for you. Both of these are also shot on iPhone. It's got that iPhone punch in, but when you punch out, woof, the sharpness, the color, everything just looks wonderful. The biggest drawback for the iPhone with portrait mode, especially in a studio backdrop setting like this, where there is, you know, the hair is curly or there's frizzes, is stuff like that, where it just kind of makes the hair disappear. So you're definitely going to notice that a lot with the iPhone shots. And that's kind of how you can pull out an iPhone shot from, you know, a DSLR shot. The interesting part with the iPhone is that you actually could turn off the portrait mode. So if you do get weird blurring like this, you can actually go in there and just turn it off. And there you go. It'll get your edges. But then it doesn't have that really nice depth of field and that soft runoff, but it is a way to recover an image. And you could combine these two in Photoshop to do some very interesting things. And here is the final comparison image. On the left, you have the iPhone, and on the right, you have the Sony. I feel as though at this point, you're going to start to get the idea of which is which, especially with knowing where the blur is and where to look for it and see how the hair takes and how the skin smooths and stuff like that. The sharpness of the eyes is actually really impressive. This is, the Sony on the right and the iPhone on the left and blown up. It's actually pretty damn impressive. Even the skin tones in this one. You can see it start to really lose it though in the eyebrows. But at what point are we really just nitpicking? And if you only have the iPhone, why not? I mean, the light I have on her is like a $40 ring light. So $40 extra to the smartphone that's already in your pocket. Why not? It's a great tool. All right, now let's head on to our last comparison. So here's our first blind comparison. I think this one might be a little bit more difficult, although if you were paying attention to the bokeh and what that program, Focus, can do, then this might actually be pretty easy. So if you look on the left shot, the bokeh is colorful. And if you look on the right shot, it is singular colors. This is picking up the lights primarily as bokeh, and then the leaves are just blurring a little bit and adding little circles, whereas this is picking up the lights and really just going to town on those things and turning them into bokeh balls. We'll compare the straight out of the iPhone shot, which is that, and you see how the bokeh is just not really prevalent. So I had to go in there and boost it, except then I was like, oh man, this is too much. It doesn't look like the other shot at all. So I brought it down a bit and changed the shape so it would kind of match the Sony shot a little bit more. But to me, the Sony shot is more smooth and it just is more equal in tones. Whereas the iPhone shot is much more poppier and it feels really beautiful to look at. It's really nice. So it's really a hard choice on this one as to which one you might prefer. If you were to punch in on the iPhone version, this is what you'd get on the face versus the Sony punched in. So this next image is where the limitations of the iPhone really shines through. Both of these shots are shot on Sony. I wanted to include them because I thought they were fantastic shots and I wanted to show you the depth of field and how much is going on here. We have a mirror, we have the bokeh happening in the mirror, we have her being blurred out in the mirror, and then we have her in the foreground in perfect focus. Both shots nailed it, no problems, not even something to second guess when you're shooting on the Sony. Now, if you were to try this on the iPhone, and I just couldn't get it to work, this is the best I could do with the portrait mode. It just didn't want to blur out the foreground or the background. You couldn't tell it which one to do. So that is a limitation to the iPhone versus the Sony for this type of shot. And this was definitely the hardest shot of all of them to attempt to get portrait mode to work with. As you might notice as I've been doing this, certain images are different sizes than other images. So on the right is the iPhone image, and it does it in this very strange format, this crop. And whereas this one is more of a 16:9 type of crop, so I had to cut them when I did I had to kind of crop them when I did the comparisons. Otherwise, you guys would have been able to figure it out just by the aspect ratio of the photo itself. On the Sony, you've got a lot of detail and a really nice smooth area where it starts to, get a little grainy or blurry. But on the iPhone, it's just a very clear image. Now, one thing that is very prevalent is see how smooth the background is? Like it's just everywhere. It's just really nice and smooth and very nice all around, has a nice circle to it. Whereas on the iPhone, the image sensor is having a little bit more trouble, not gradiating the background. That's the difference between a full frame sensor and a sensor the size of your fingernail, essentially. But considering, it's pretty impressive. And once again, you start to get those hair blur outs where it can't really handle the frizzing. You can also see that on the ear, it just cuts out the extra hair there, whereas on the Sony it leaves it in there. This image is Sony on the left and Sony on the right again. Once again, that mirror with the tree and the lights in the background just couldn't keep up on the iPhone. So I'm trying to show you a little bit of what the benefits of shooting on, a full frame sensor camera can have, as well as the benefits of shooting on an iPhone. So obviously, if the first shot was a trick, this is also a trick. These are both Sony shots. Once again, this kind of thing just doesn't work on the iPhone. I wanted to throw these in there because I wanted to say, even with the limitations of the iPhone, oftentimes that limitation really spurs creativity. So, where you can't get a shot like this on the iPhone, you could probably set something up a little differently to really, make the iPhone shine, as you saw with some of the other shots. So you just have to know your tools, know your lighting, and know your scenario, and understand how to use them in a way that works for you. So ultimately, the conclusion that you can draw is that for things like social media and for Instagram and things like that, the iPhone is a very valuable tool to have with you, with the ability to adjust the depth mapping, with the ability to change the fall off of the bokeh, with the ability to color correct in your phone with amazing presets, even the ones that Apple provide for you. And all of the different apps that you can just do so many tweaks to your photo right there and have it ready to go on your phone to send off to your social media. The iPhone to me is absolutely an invaluable tool to have. Now, that being said, shooting with the Sony A7R III is not replicable. I mean, the quality of the images, the megapixels and the punching and the smoothness and the quickness and me being able, me doing dance photography. There's a lot of things that make it so that these two together make an awesome team for anyone's arsenal. What this can't do, this can do. And if you need to send a photo from this to this, you can. So I hope you found this video interesting. I hope I was able to trick you with some of the results and findings, but ultimately I think the winner is, there's no winner. It's whatever camera works for what you need to shoot. I get asked this question a lot. What's the best gear, Tristan? What's the best equipment? What is the best this? What is the best that? What's your story? Create a good story first, then use the tools at your disposal to really make it shine. And that is the best piece of advice I could give you. Tech specs aside, comparison in this video aside, all of the stuff that I just showed you aside, tell your story and get it out there. And then as you grow and as you build your profession, is it worth it for me to drop, $3,000 on the Sony A7R III? Or is it just worth it for me to shoot on iPhone? Or should I go look at some of the other phones? Or should I look at some of the other cameras? Do I need a full frame? There's so many different options out there. There's so many affordable options, so many high-end options, so many freaking cameras just in our pockets that you have no excuse not to go out there and tell your story. But start with that story first, and I think you'll be just fine. Anyway, this is Tristan Pope from Tristan Pope Photography, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember to hit that like button as well. You can also subscribe. It's got to be here somewhere. And all that information will also be in the description below. We will see you guys and girls next time.
Ready?